I stood in my childhood living room, watching my father's calloused hands grip the edges of a $22,000 cashier's check. The entire extended family had gathered for Thanksgiving dinner, their plates still warm with turkey and mashed potatoes when I pulled out the envelope I had been saving for this moment. I told them this check would pay off their mortgage completely. My father looked at the numbers then, at me, and something dark flashed across his weathered face. Without warning, he began tearing the check into tiny pieces, each rip echoing through the suddenly silent room. The whole family erupted in cruel, mocking laughter. My name is Marlon, and 6 months ago, I thought I had finally made it. At 32 years old, I had climbed from a broke college student working 3 jobs to a senior software engineer at one of Seattle's biggest tech companies. The journey had been brutal, but worth every sleepless night. Growing up in Portland, Oregon, money was always tight in our household. My father worked construction, and my mother cleaned offices downtown. They scraped together every penny to help me through community college before I transferred to Oregon State University for computer science. While my classmates partied on weekends, I stocked shelves at a grocery store, delivered pizza until 2 in the morning, and tutored struggling students in math. I missed family barbecues because I was studying for exams. I skipped Christmas Eve dinner because I had to work a double shift to pay rent. Every family gathering became a reminder of what I was sacrificing, but my parents always said they understood. They told me education was the way to build a better life, and they were proud of my dedication. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at a software company in Seattle. The salary was decent, but I lived in a tiny studio apartment and drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a cracked windshield. I saved every extra dollar and sent money home when I could afford it. My parents never asked for help, but I knew things were still tight for them. 3 years of 60-hour work weeks and constant skill building paid off when I got promoted to senior developer. My salary jumped to 6 figures, and suddenly I could afford things I had only dreamed about. I moved into a modern apartment downtown, bought a reliable car, and started investing in my future. But with success came distance. The 8-hour drive from Seattle to Portland felt longer each time I made it. My work schedule became more demanding, and I found myself missing more family events. When my cousin Jake got married last spring, I had to skip the wedding for a crucial product launch meeting with executives. When my grandfather had minor surgery over the summer, I could only visit for 1 day because of a looming project deadline. Each missed event created tension I could feel during phone calls home. My sister Emma, who still lived with our parents while working part-time at a local coffee shop, started making comments about how I was too important for family now. My mother's voice carried disappointment when I explained why I couldn't make it to Sunday dinners anymore. The guilt ate at me, but I told myself it would be worth it when I could finally give back to the people who sacrificed for my education. That's when I got the idea for the mortgage payoff. My parents had been paying on their small 3-bedroom house for 28 years, and I knew the monthly payments still stretched their budget thin. I calculated that $22,000 would eliminate their debt completely. It represented 4 months of my new salary, but seeing the relief on their faces would be worth every penny. I imagined my father's shocked expression, transforming into pride. My mother crying happy tears, and my sister finally understanding that my absence had purpose. I planned the surprise carefully, getting the cashier's check from my bank in Seattle and driving straight to Portland for Thanksgiving. When I walked into the house carrying flowers for my mother and expensive wine for dinner, I felt nervous excitement building in my chest, but the atmosphere felt strange from the moment I arrived. Uncle Gary made comments about my fancy clothes when he saw my button-down shirt and khakis. Aunt Patricia asked pointed questions about my expensive car, which was just a 3-year-old Honda Accord. My cousin Jake wondered aloud if I was slumming it by coming to a regular family dinner. Even my own sister seemed different. Emma kept taking photos of my outfit and car, with her phone making jokes about documenting my visit for proof that I still remembered where I came from. The comments felt sharper than usual, family teasing carrying an edge of genuine resentment I had never noticed before. During dinner conversation, I tried to share updates about my work and life in Seattle, but every story seemed to generate eye rolls or sarcastic responses. When I mentioned a recent business trip to San Francisco, Uncle Gary muttered something about how nice for some people it must be to travel for work. When I talked about my new apartment, Aunt Patricia asked if I had forgotten what real homes looked like. The tension reached a breaking point when I finally stood up and announced I had a special gift for my parents. I pulled out the envelope containing the cashier's check, my heart pounding with anticipation. I explained that I wanted to pay off their mortgage as a thank you for everything they had sacrificed for my education and future. That's when my father's expression turned cold. He looked at the check amount, then back at me, and his voice filled with anger I had never heard before. He accused me of trying to buy forgiveness for abandoning the family. He said I thought money could fix my selfishness and arrogance. He called it charity, from someone who had forgotten his roots and believed he was better than everyone else. Then came the tearing. Piece by piece, my father destroyed the check, while the room filled with laughter and applause from family members I thought loved me. My mother shook her head sadly, saying she had raised me better than this. Emma held up her phone, recording the whole scene, while giggling about how this would make perfect social media content. I stood frozen, watching $22,000 flutter to the carpet in tiny pieces, realizing that my family's resentment ran much deeper than I had ever imagined. The morning after Thanksgiving brought no relief from the previous evening's humiliation. I woke up in my childhood bedroom, staring at faded posters of basketball players I had idolized in high school, trying to process what had happened. The torn pieces of the check were still scattered across the living room carpet when I walked downstairs for coffee. My mother stood at the kitchen sink, washing dishes with mechanical precision. She didn't look at me when I entered, just continued scrubbing the same plate over and over. The silence stretched between us, until my father appeared in the doorway, his face set in grim determination. "We need to have a family meeting," he announced. "I've called everyone. They'll be here in an hour." I felt my stomach drop. "Dad, I think we should just talk you and me. We don't need to involve everyone else." "Oh, we absolutely do," he replied firmly. "This problem is bigger than just you and me, son. This affects the whole family." Within 60 minutes, our small living room filled with people. Uncle Gary arrived first, his work boots still muddy from a construction job. Aunt Patricia followed with her husband Dale, who had been laid off from the lumber mill 8 months earlier. My cousins Jake and Samantha drove over from their apartment across town, both looking curious and slightly excited about whatever drama was about to unfold. Even my grandparents came, my 78-year-old grandfather moving slowly with his walker, while my grandmother carried a thermos of coffee and wore the concerned expression she reserved for serious family emergencies. Mrs. Chen from next door somehow got invited too, along with Pastor Williams from the church my parents attended. They arranged chairs in a circle around the coffee table, leaving me standing in the center, like I was on trial. My father cleared his throat and began what he called an intervention for my ego problem. "We've all been watching Marlon change over the past few years." He started, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he used when lecturing me as a teenager. "He's become someone we don't recognize anymore. Someone who values money and status over family and relationships." Uncle Gary jumped in next. "Remember when he missed Jake's wedding for some work meeting? His own cousin's wedding. What's more important than family? And he didn't even visit when Dad was in the hospital," added Aunt Patricia, referring to my grandfather's minor outpatient procedure that he had specifically told me not to worry about. Too busy with his fancy Seattle lifestyle to care about his own grandfather. My sister Emma pulled out a manila folder thick with printed papers. She spread them across the coffee table like evidence in a court case. "I've been documenting his behavior on social media," she announced proudly. "Look at these posts about his expensive apartment, his business trips, his new car. Every single photo is designed to show off his success and make the rest of us feel small." The papers included screenshots of my LinkedIn profile celebrating work achievements, Instagram photos from company events, and business travels and even pictures of my apartment that I had shared when I moved in. Seeing my life laid out like criminal evidence made me feel exposed and violated. "He's forgotten where he comes from," declared Aunt Patricia, her voice rising with emotion. "He thinks he's better than all of us now. Look at how he dresses, how he talks, the way he acts like our problems are beneath him." Pastor Williams, who barely knew me beyond childhood Christmas services, nodded gravely. "Pride comes before the fall, young man. Success without humility is just vanity." My mother finally spoke, her voice breaking with tears. "I've lost my son to corporate greed. The boy I raised would never throw money at us like we're some charity case. He would sit down and talk with us, spend time with us, show us he still cares about something other than his career." Each family member took turns listing my perceived crimes against the family. Missing my cousin's graduation party for a work deadline. Buying expensive gifts instead of making handmade ones. Talking about my job achievements instead of asking enough questions about their lives. Not calling frequently enough. Not visiting long enough when I did come home. The intervention continued for 2 hours. Every aspect of my personality and choices underwent scrutiny and criticism. When I tried to defend myself, explaining the pressures of my job and the genuine love behind my gift, they dismissed my words as excuses and deflection. "You're not listening," my father said sternly. "This isn't about explanations. This is about acknowledging that you've lost your way and need to make serious changes." Uncle Gary suggested I quit my job and move back to Portland to reconnect with what really matters. Aunt Patricia proposed I take a lower-paying job that would give me more time for family obligations. My grandmother wondered aloud if college had put ideas in my head that made me think I was too good for regular people. The most painful part was watching family friends and neighbors nod along with every criticism. Mrs. Chen talked about how her own children still made time for family despite their busy schedules. Pastor Williams quoted scripture about honoring your father and mother. Even Jake and Samantha, who I had considered close friends as well as cousins, agreed that my behavior had become concerning. As the meeting reached its climax, my father issued an ultimatum that hit me like a physical blow. "You need to choose Marlon. You can have your career and your fancy lifestyle, or you can have your family. But you can't have both while maintaining this superior attitude that you're too important for the people who love you." The room fell silent as everyone waited for my response. I looked around the circle of faces, searching for even one person who might understand my perspective or defend my character. Instead, I saw judgment, resentment, and disappointment everywhere I turned. "I never thought I was better than anyone," I said quietly. "I worked hard because I wanted to build something good, not to hurt anyone or prove anything. I brought that check because I love you all and wanted to show gratitude for the sacrifices you made for my education." "But that's exactly the problem," my mother interjected. "You think love is about money. You think gratitude means writing checks. Real love is about time, attention, and putting family first in your priorities." The intervention ended with my father demanding a public apology to everyone present and a promise to completely restructure my life priorities. When I said I needed time to think about everything they had shared, the disappointed sighs and headshakes made it clear that any response other than immediate submission was unacceptable. I left that meeting feeling more confused and hurt than angry. Maybe they were right. Maybe success had changed me in ways I couldn't see. Maybe I really had become the selfish, arrogant person they described. The doubt crept into my mind like poison, making me question everything I thought I knew about myself and my motivations. I spent the entire night lying awake in my childhood bed, staring at the ceiling and replaying every word from the intervention. The house felt different somehow, like the walls themselves were judging me. By morning, I had convinced myself that maybe my family was right about my character flaws, even if their approach felt harsh. I decided to write individual letters to each family member, pouring my heart onto paper in a way that speaking face-to-face hadn't allowed. In my letter to my father, I acknowledged how my absence must have felt like rejection and explained that every missed event had caused me genuine pain. To my mother, I wrote about how her strength had inspired my work ethic, and how I hoped to make her proud, not distant. To Emma, I apologized for not being the brother she needed, and promised to do better. Each letter took hours to craft. I wrote about my loneliness in Seattle, my constant worry about being good enough, and my deep love for our family despite the geographical distance. I explained how the mortgage payment had represented my dream of giving back, not showing off. I admitted to mistakes and asked for forgiveness, while also gently expressing how hurt I felt by their reaction. The next morning, I drove to each family member's house to deliver the letters personally. I started with my parents, hoping that reading my words privately might help them understand my perspective. When my father opened the front door, I handed him the envelope with trembling hands. "I wrote this for you and Mom," I said softly. "I know yesterday was difficult, but I hope you'll read what I couldn't say properly before." My father took the envelope, looked at it for a long moment, then walked straight to the fireplace in the living room. Without reading a single word, he tossed both letters into the flames and watched them burn. "More manipulation," he said coldly. "You think pretty words can fix what you've broken, but actions speak louder than letters, son." My mother appeared behind him, her face stone cold. "We told you what needs to change, Marlon. Either you're willing to do the work, or you're not. Letters are just more of the same avoidance behavior." I stood frozen, watching my heartfelt apologies turn to ash. Before I could respond, Emma appeared with her phone already recording. "Look, everyone," she said in a bright, cheerful voice for her camera. "My brother's here trying to write his way out of accountability. Isn't that just like someone who thinks they're smarter than everyone else?" She live-streamed the entire encounter on Instagram, providing commentary about toxic family members who think money talks, while filming my shocked face and the burning letters. Within minutes, the video had dozens of likes and comments from local people I recognized from high school and family friends. The comments were brutal. "Good for your parents for not falling for his manipulation. Rich kids always think they can buy their way out of trouble. Your family is setting good boundaries. Don't let him guilt trip you into accepting fake apologies." Emma's followers ate up the drama, sharing the video and adding their own commentary about entitled children who abandon their families for success. The story spread through our small Portland community like wildfire, with each retelling making me sound worse. When I tried to deliver letters to Uncle Gary and Aunt Patricia, I discovered they had already seen the Instagram video. Uncle Gary refused to even open his door, shouting through the window that he had no interest in more of my nonsense. Aunt Patricia accepted her letter, but immediately threw it in her garbage can, while I was still standing on her porch. By noon, my mother had blocked my phone number. When I returned to my parents' house to collect my things, I found the locks had been changed. A note taped to the door informed me that my belongings would be left on the back porch, and I was not welcome inside until I was ready to make real changes. The family created a group chat without me, and Emma screenshot their conversations for her social media audience. They shared memes about ungrateful children and posted articles about successful kids who forget their families. Every post generated more local attention and sympathy for my poor parents, dealing with their difficult son. Uncle Gary took the publicity campaign further by posting a lengthy Facebook rant about ungrateful children who forget their raising. Without naming me directly, he described a family member who had let success go to his head and tried to throw money at problems instead of showing real love. The post received hundreds of likes and shares from people in our community. The story caught the attention of our local newspaper when Emma contacted them directly. A reporter interviewed my father for an article titled, "Local Family Stands Up to Corporate Son's Manipulation." The piece painted my parents as humble, hardworking people, refusing to be bought off by their successful but emotionally distant son. My father appeared on a local radio talk show as a guest discussing entitled millennial children who prioritize careers over family values. While he never mentioned my name on air, everyone in Portland knew exactly who he was talking about. Call-in listeners shared their own stories about ungrateful children and praised my father for taking a stand. The public humiliation followed me back to Seattle. Coworkers started asking uncomfortable questions about the newspaper article that had somehow made its way to our office. My apartment building neighbors, many of whom had connected with me on social media, saw the family posts and began treating me differently. I felt completely isolated and began questioning everything about my life. Maybe I really had become the selfish, arrogant person they described. Maybe success had corrupted my values without me realizing it. Maybe I deserved the public shame and family rejection. The worst part was the loneliness. For the first time in my adult life, I had no family to call when I felt lost. No support system to help me process what was happening. No one who knew the real me behind the public character assassination. I stopped posting on social media, entirely afraid that any content would be screenshot and used as evidence of my alleged arrogance. I declined invitations from Seattle friends, worried that I might actually be as self-centered as my family claimed. Depression settled over me like a heavy blanket, making even basic daily tasks feel overwhelming. 3 weeks passed in this fog of self-doubt and isolation. I went to work, came home, and sat alone in my apartment, wondering if I should just give up my career and move back to Portland to rebuild relationships on their terms. Maybe starting over as the humble, grateful son they wanted would be worth sacrificing everything I had worked to build. That's when Mrs. Henderson called and changed everything. Mrs. Henderson had been our next-door neighbor for as long as I could remember. At 76 years old, she had essentially helped raise me while my parents worked long hours. I had shoveled her driveway every winter throughout high school and helped her with yard work during college summers. She was like a second grandmother, and I trusted her completely. Her voice sounded different when she called my Seattle number on a Tuesday evening, 3 weeks after the Thanksgiving disaster. Instead of her usual warm, chatty tone, she spoke in hushed, urgent whispers. "Marlon, honey, I need to tell you something important," she began. "I've been watching what's been happening to you, and I can't stay quiet anymore. What your family is doing isn't right, and you deserve to know the truth." I felt my heart start racing. "What do you mean, Mrs. Henderson?" "I overheard phone conversations, sweetheart. Your parents and Emma have been planning this for months. They've been jealous of your success and worried that if you felt too appreciated, you'd never give them money when they really needed it." The words hit me like a physical blow. That can't be right. They were genuinely hurt by my absence from family events. "Oh, honey, no. I heard Emma on the phone with your mother back in September talking about how they needed to take you down a peg, so you'd feel guilty enough to help them financially. They researched your salary online and calculated exactly how much they thought you could afford to give them." Mrs. Henderson's revelation continued to unfold like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. She explained that she had been working in her garden when conversations drifted through the thin walls between our houses. At first, she thought she was misunderstanding, but the discussions became too frequent and detailed to ignore. "Your father lost a lot of money, Marlon. $43,000 in some kind of internet investment that went bad 6 months ago. They've been hiding it from everyone, but they're in serious financial trouble." She told me about the second mortgage my parents had taken out on the house, trying to cover the cryptocurrency losses my father had made after watching YouTube videos about guaranteed investment strategies. They were 3 months behind on payments and facing foreclosure proceedings that would start in January. Emma's financial situation was even worse than I had imagined. She had quit her coffee shop job 8 months earlier to pursue becoming a social media influencer, convinced she could make easy money posting lifestyle content. When that failed to generate income, she racked up $18,000 in credit card debt, trying to maintain the appearance of success while living rent-free with our parents. The extended family's money problems ran deeper, too. Uncle Gary's small construction company was failing because of the economic downturn and increased competition from larger contractors. He had been desperately seeking investors or loans to keep from going under completely. Aunt Patricia and her husband Dale were behind on their mortgage payments after his layoff and their daughter's college tuition bills. "They've all been struggling, honey, but instead of being honest about their problems, they decided to make you the villain," Mrs. Henderson explained. Emma found articles online about your company and calculated your probable salary. They figured if they made you feel guilty and ashamed enough, you'd offer to help everyone without them having to admit their failures. The intervention had been a carefully orchestrated performance, designed to break down my emotional defenses. Every accusation, every example of my supposed selfishness, every demand for apology had been calculated to make me feel obligated to prove my love through financial support. Mrs. Henderson had more devastating information to share. Emma had accidentally sent text messages to the wrong number the week before Thanksgiving, detailing their strategy to break Marlon down until he agrees to help everyone. The mistaken recipient was Mrs. Henderson's granddaughter, who forwarded the messages thinking they might be important. Emma wrote about how they needed to make you feel like a terrible son, so you'd overcompensate by giving them money. Mrs. Henderson continued. She called it Phase 1 of getting you to support the whole family. Phase 2 was supposed to be tearful apologies and requests for loans they never intended to pay back. I sat in stunned silence, processing the magnitude of the betrayal. Everything I had questioned about my own character, every moment of self-doubt and guilt, had been manufactured by the people I loved most. "There's more, sweetheart," Mrs. Henderson said gently. "I've been keeping track of what they've been saying around the neighborhood. They're not done with you yet. Emma's been telling people you refused to help with your grandfather's medical bills, even though his insurance covered everything completely. Your father's been hinting that you stole money from them somehow." The public character assassination campaign was expanding beyond what I had seen on social media. My family was actively spreading lies throughout our community, creating a narrative where they were victims of my greed and selfishness. Mrs. Henderson's final revelation was the most disturbing. "They've contacted your work, honey. Emma called your company's main number last week, claiming to be concerned about your mental health and asking if they knew you had been stealing money from family members." I felt physically sick. My family wasn't just manipulating me emotionally. They were actively trying to destroy my career and reputation. The calculated cruelty of their campaign went beyond simple jealousy or financial desperation into something much darker. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Because I watched you grow up, and I know your heart," Mrs. Henderson replied firmly. "You're a good man who worked hard for everything you've achieved. What they're doing to you is wrong, and someone needs to stand up for the truth." She offered to provide evidence of everything she had told me, including the mistaken text messages and recordings of conversations she had overheard. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than guilt and confusion. I felt anger. Pure, righteous anger at being manipulated and betrayed by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. But underneath the anger was something even more powerful: relief at finally knowing I hadn't been crazy or selfish. My instincts about their behavior had been correct all along. As I thanked Mrs. Henderson and hung up the phone, I realized that my family's manipulation had actually given me an unexpected gift. They had shown me exactly who they really were when they thought they had nothing to lose. Now, I knew the truth, and I could finally start planning my response. The next morning, I called in sick to work and spent the entire day researching everything Mrs. Henderson had told me. As a software engineer, I had strong analytical skills and access to public records databases that most people didn't know how to navigate. Within hours, I confirmed the devastating scope of my family's financial problems. Public records showed the second mortgage on my parents' house, filed just 2 weeks after my father's cryptocurrency losses. The foreclosure notice was already in the system, scheduled to proceed in early January if payments weren't brought current. Emma's social media activity told its own story when I analyzed it carefully. Her posts about the influencer lifestyle stopped abruptly 8 months ago, replaced by increasingly desperate attempts to generate engagement and sponsorship deals that clearly weren't working. Her recent posts about family values and entitled siblings had received more attention than anything else she had shared in months. I hired a private investigator to verify the information and uncover additional details I might have missed. What came back exceeded my worst expectations about my family's deception and criminal behavior. The investigator discovered that my family's character assassination campaign extended far beyond what I had witnessed personally. Emma had created multiple fake social media accounts to spread rumors about my character in professional networking groups. She posted anonymous comments on local business forums claiming I had cheated my way through college and lied on job applications. My father had contacted not just my current employer, but also my previous company, claiming that I had stolen money from the family and asking if they had experienced any integrity issues with my work. He presented himself as a concerned parent, trying to get his son help for alleged financial crimes. Uncle Gary had committed actual identity theft by applying for a business loan using my name, social security number, and salary information without my permission. The loan application was denied, but the inquiry showed up on my credit report and could have damaged my financial standing. The investigation revealed that Aunt Patricia had been embezzling small amounts from the local charity, where she volunteered as treasurer, using the stolen money to cover basic living expenses after her husband's layoff. She was covering her tracks by manipulating the books, but a forensic accountant would easily discover the missing funds. Most disturbing of all, my family had been systematically contacting my high school friends, college acquaintances, and Seattle social connections with false stories about my character. Emma sent Facebook messages claiming I had become abusive toward family members and warning people to be careful around me. The private investigator also uncovered evidence of the manipulation strategy Mrs. Henderson had described. Phone records showed dozens of calls between family members in the weeks leading up to Thanksgiving, far more than their usual communication patterns. Text message metadata confirmed the timing of conversations about their financial problems and plans to approach me for help. I consulted with an attorney about my legal options and was advised that I had strong cases for defamation, identity, theft, harassment, and possibly fraud. The documented pattern of lies and criminal behavior gave me leverage I hadn't expected to have. But the most valuable discovery was strategic rather than legal. My family's desperate financial situation meant they would inevitably contact me again when their problems reached a breaking point. The foreclosure deadline in January was only 6 weeks away, and none of them had the resources to prevent it without outside help. I realized I could wait for them to come to me, knowing they had no other options, and then respond from a position of complete knowledge about their manipulation and crimes. Instead of being their victim, I could control the timing and terms of our next interaction. I spent the following weeks carefully documenting everything, saving recordings of threatening voicemails they left, screenshot every defamatory social media post before they could be deleted, and creating a comprehensive timeline of their escalating manipulation and abuse. My attorney helped me understand exactly which laws they had broken and what consequences they could face if I chose to pursue legal action. The identity theft alone carried potential felony charges, while the defamation campaign had caused measurable damage to my professional reputation. But I didn't want revenge. I wanted justice, accountability, and the restoration of truth. I wanted my family to understand the consequences of their choices and have the opportunity to make things right if they were genuinely willing to change. As December progressed, I watched from a distance as their social media posts became increasingly desperate. Emma's content shifted from mocking me to general complaints about financial stress and unfair life circumstances. Uncle Gary started posting about the struggles of small business owners and hinting at major personal challenges. My parents stopped posting entirely, which was unusual for my mother, who normally shared family photos and community news regularly. The silence suggested they were dealing with problems too serious for public discussion. I prepared a comprehensive response plan that would expose their manipulation while offering them a path toward redemption if they were willing to take responsibility for their actions. The plan included evidence of their crimes, documentation of their lies, and clear terms for how we could potentially rebuild our relationships on an honest foundation. By Christmas week, I was ready. I knew they would come to me soon, probably presenting themselves as apologetic family members who had learned from their mistakes. When they did, I would be prepared to show them exactly what I had learned about their true motivations and give them a choice between accountability and consequences. The waiting was almost over, and I felt calm confidence instead of the guilt and confusion that had consumed me for months. Truth was a powerful foundation to stand on, and I finally had all the truth I needed. On the Saturday morning after Christmas, my doorbell rang at exactly 7 o'clock. I looked through the peephole of my Seattle apartment and saw my entire extended family standing in the hallway. My parents, Emma, Uncle Gary, Aunt Patricia, with her husband Dale, and both of my grandparents. They looked tired, disheveled, and desperate in a way I had never seen before. My father stood at the front of the group, shifting his weight from foot to foot like a nervous teenager. Emma clutched a manila envelope against her chest, her eyes red from crying. Uncle Gary kept checking his phone anxiously, while Aunt Patricia whispered urgently to my grandmother. I opened the door slowly, keeping my expression neutral, despite the satisfaction building in my chest. This was exactly what Mrs. Henderson had predicted, and I was completely prepared for whatever performance they were about to deliver. Marlon. My father began, his voice cracking with emotion. Son, we need to talk to you. We've made terrible mistakes, and we need to apologize for how we treated you. My mother stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. We've been thinking about everything that happened, and we realize how wrong we were. The house feels so empty without you, honey. We miss our son terribly. Emma spoke next, her usual confident attitude replaced by genuine-looking remorse. I've been awful to you, Marlon. Those social media posts were just me being hurt and stupid. I deleted everything and realized how much I've missed having my big brother in my life. Uncle Gary cleared his throat awkwardly. We all overreacted at Thanksgiving. Your gift was generous and loving, and we were too proud to accept it properly. We're hoping you might give us another chance to be the family you deserve. Aunt Patricia nodded vigorously. We've learned so much about ourselves these past few weeks. Everyone's been dealing with stress and taking it out on the wrong person. You didn't deserve any of the treatment you received. My grandfather, who rarely spoke much anymore, managed a weak smile. I'm proud of everything you've accomplished, grandson. I never meant to make you feel otherwise. I invited them inside and offered coffee, watching carefully as they arranged themselves around my living room. They looked around my apartment with what appeared to be genuine appreciation rather than the judgment I had seen during previous visits. The apologies continued for nearly an hour, each family member taking responsibility for specific hurtful actions and expressing regret for their behavior. They spoke about missing me during the holidays and realizing how much they had taken my love and generosity for granted. Emma pulled out the manila envelope she had been carrying and removed a cashier's check for $22,000. We want to give this back to you, she said softly. The money you wanted to spend on the mortgage. We were wrong to reject your gift, and we're hoping you might still be willing to help us start over. My father's voice grew emotional as he described how they had spent weeks talking about their mistakes and learning to appreciate my sacrifices and achievements. We want to support your success instead of resenting it, he said. We want to be proud of you without feeling bad about ourselves. Uncle Gary mentioned almost casually that his construction business was struggling, and he could really use advice from someone with my financial knowledge. I know you're busy, but if you ever had time to look at some investment opportunities, I'd trust your judgment completely. Aunt Patricia hinted that several family members were facing temporary setbacks that would be easier to handle with support from someone they loved and trusted. We're not asking for anything, she said carefully. We just want you to know that we value your wisdom and guidance. The performance was masterful. If I hadn't known the truth about their manipulation, I might have been completely convinced by their apparent transformation and genuine remorse. They hit every emotional note, perfectly acknowledging specific hurts while offering exactly the appreciation and validation I had always wanted from them. As they spoke, I responded with simple acknowledgments, but no forgiveness or acceptance. I thanked them for coming and said I appreciated their apologies, but I didn't offer the emotional reconciliation they were clearly hoping to receive. The longer I remained neutral, the more uncomfortable they became. Uncle Gary's subtle mention of needing investment advice became a direct request for a loan to save his business. Aunt Patricia's hints about temporary setbacks turned into specific requests for help with mortgage payments and college tuition bills. When my father finally asked directly if I might be willing to help the family through their current financial difficulties, I told them calmly that I had something important to show them. I walked to my desk and pulled out a thick folder of documents I had prepared for this exact moment. Returning to the living room, I began laying papers across my coffee table, while my family watched with growing confusion and concern. Bank statements showing my father's cryptocurrency losses, public records of the second mortgage and impending foreclosure, credit reports revealing Emma's massive debt, and Uncle Gary's identity theft attempt, screenshots of defamatory social media posts and fake online profiles, phone records documenting their manipulation strategy planning calls. As the evidence accumulated on the table, their expressions shifted from confusion to recognition to outright terror. They realized I knew everything about their financial problems, their lies, their manipulation campaign, and their crimes. I know about the $43,000 Dad lost in cryptocurrency. I said calmly, maintaining direct eye contact with each family member. I know about the second mortgage and the foreclosure notice. I know about Emma's credit card debt and failed influencer career. I know about Uncle Gary using my personal information to apply for fraudulent loans. Emma tried to interrupt with desperate explanations, but I continued methodically through my documentation. I know about the fake social media accounts, the lies told to my employers, the character assassination campaign in our community, and the manipulation strategy you planned for months before Thanksgiving. My father's face went completely pale as I showed him printed screenshots of conversations where they had calculated my worth to them and planned their approach. I know this intervention, and these apologies are phase 2 of your plan to extract money from me without having to admit your failures or take responsibility for your choices. Uncle Gary broke down first, his tough construction worker facade crumbling as he realized the magnitude of legal trouble he faced for identity theft. Marlon, I was desperate. The business was failing, and I panicked. I never meant to hurt you. Emma confessed to her depression and jealousy, explaining how watching my success had made her feel worthless and driven her to destructive behavior. I couldn't stand that you had everything I wanted, so I tried to tear you down instead of building myself up. Aunt Patricia admitted to the charity embezzlement, begging me not to report her, because her family would be destroyed if she went to jail. We've lost everything already. Please don't take away what little we have left. My father completely broke down sobbing as he confessed to his gambling addiction and the shame that had driven him to blame me instead of taking responsibility for his mistakes. I destroyed our family's security with my stupidity, and instead of admitting it, I made you the villain. I'm so ashamed of what I've become. As my family's elaborate deception collapsed around them, I felt a combination of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction that the truth was finally exposed, but sadness that it had come to this level of manipulation and betrayal. Now came the most important part of my plan, offering them a choice between accountability and consequences, between genuine change and legal action, between rebuilding our relationships honestly or losing them forever. The room fell silent, except for the sound of my family members crying as they processed the complete exposure of their deception. I looked around at each person, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time in my adult life. They weren't the loving but misguided family I had imagined. They were desperate people who had chosen manipulation and crime over honesty and accountability. But I also saw something else in their faces, genuine shame and recognition of how far they had fallen from their own values. The elaborate lies and calculated cruelty had taken a toll on them too, turning them into people they probably didn't recognize when they looked in the mirror. I set down the last document and leaned back in my chair, giving them time to absorb the full scope of what I knew. When I spoke again, my voice was calm but firm. I want you to understand something important, I began. This experience has taught me more about family love and boundaries than any other event in my life. You tried to manipulate me by making me question my own character and worth. But instead, you showed me exactly who I am and what I value. My father tried to speak, but I held up my hand to continue. I learned that real love doesn't require constant proof or sacrifice. I learned that success doesn't make me a bad person, and helping others doesn't make me arrogant. I learned that I have the right to set boundaries with people who treat me poorly, even if those people are family. I explained how their manipulation had actually strengthened my sense of self-worth and taught me to trust my own judgment over other people's opinions. You wanted to make me feel guilty and ashamed, so I would give you money without question. Instead, you helped me understand that I should never have to buy love or acceptance from anyone. Emma wiped her eyes and looked up at me. What happens now, Marlon? Are you going to have us arrested? I had spent weeks considering this exact question. The legal case against them was strong, and pursuing criminal charges would provide a clear consequence for their behavior. But I had realized that justice and revenge weren't the same thing, and what I really wanted was transformation rather than punishment. I'm going to give you a choice, I said, pulling out another folder I had prepared. Option 1 is that I turn all this evidence over to the police, the IRS, the charity Patricia stole from, and every employer who received false information about me. You deal with the legal consequences of your choices while I move forward with my life. The fear in their faces was palpable as they contemplated criminal charges, civil lawsuits, and public exposure of their crimes. Option 2, I continued, is that you take full responsibility for what you've done and commit to making real changes. Dad, you enter a gambling addiction treatment program and begin making honest amends for the financial damage you've caused. Emma, you start therapy for the depression and jealousy that drove your behavior, and you delete all social media accounts until you learn healthier coping strategies. I turn to Uncle Gary. You accept bankruptcy honestly, instead of trying to defraud your way out of business failure, and you find stable employment rather than looking for shortcuts. To Aunt Patricia, I added, you enter a community service program and set up a payment plan to repay every penny you stole from that charity. The terms weren't punitive, they were therapeutic. Each family member would have to address the underlying problems that had led to their desperate choices, while making concrete amends for the harm they had caused. If you choose option 2, I explained, I'll provide financial assistance to help stabilize your situations, but only after you've demonstrated genuine commitment to change through your actions, not just your words. My mother spoke for the first time since the apologies ended. What about our relationship, Marlon? Can we ever be a real family again? I had thought about this question more than any other. That depends entirely on whether you're willing to rebuild our relationships based on honesty instead of manipulation. I want to have a family, but not one where I have to constantly prove my worth or worry about hidden agendas behind every interaction. Over the following months, I watched my family members make their choices. My father entered Gamblers Anonymous and attended meetings religiously, working through the 12-step program with genuine commitment. He got a part-time job to supplement his Social Security and began paying down the debt he had created through his cryptocurrency losses. Emma started individual therapy and discovered that her social media addiction had been masking serious depression and anxiety. She deleted all her accounts and enrolled in community college courses to develop real skills instead of chasing online fame. Her transformation was the most dramatic. Without the constant pressure of maintaining a fake online persona, her natural personality emerged. Uncle Gary filed for bankruptcy and found work as a foreman for a larger construction company, accepting that he was better suited to managing projects than running a business. The steady paycheck and benefits provided security his failed company never had. Aunt Patricia completed 200 hours of community service and established a payment plan to repay the charity she had stolen from. She also found work as a bookkeeper, using her financial skills in an honest way, while rebuilding her sense of self-worth through legitimate contributions. 6 months later, we gathered for Easter dinner at my parents' house. The atmosphere felt completely different from any family gathering in my memory. Instead of undercurrents of resentment and hidden agendas, there was genuine appreciation for each person's presence and contributions. My family members shared updates about their recovery processes and acknowledged my success without resentment. They asked thoughtful questions about my work and life in Seattle, expressing genuine interest rather than judgment. When I offered to help with my grandfather's upcoming medical expenses, they accepted gratefully, but insisted on creating a formal loan agreement with repayment terms. Most importantly, they had learned to love me without requiring me to diminish myself to make them feel better. My achievements became a source of family pride rather than shame, and my boundaries were respected rather than challenged. As I reflected on everything that had happened, I realized the profound lesson this experience had taught me. Boundaries aren't walls designed to keep people out. They're bridges that allow healthy relationships to grow. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is refusing to enable their worst behavior while offering them the chance to become their best selves. Love doesn't require endless sacrifice or constant proof of devotion. Real love celebrates success, respects boundaries, and chooses honesty over manipulation. The family I have now is smaller, but infinitely stronger than the one I thought I had before, built on truth, rather than obligation, and mutual respect, rather than guilt. My father still struggles with his gambling addiction, but he faces it honestly, instead of blaming others for his choices. Emma has found genuine self-worth through education and therapy, rather than social media validation. Uncle Gary has discovered that steady employment provides more security than risky business ventures. Aunt Patricia has rebuilt her integrity through service and accountability. And I have learned that being successful doesn't make me selfish. Setting boundaries doesn't make me cruel, and demanding honesty doesn't make me unforgiving. Sometimes, the people who love us most need us to refuse their manipulation in order to help them find their way back to their better selves. The $22,000 I originally wanted to give them eventually went toward my father's treatment program, Emma's therapy and education, and helping the whole family establish healthier financial habits. But unlike my original gift, this support came with accountability, transparency, and mutual respect. Now when I visit Portland, I'm welcomed as the son and brother they're proud to know, not the target they hope to manipulate. When I share good news about my career, they celebrate with me instead of resenting me. When I need support during difficult times, they offer genuine comfort instead of conditional love. That Thanksgiving dinner when my father tore up my check was the worst and best thing that ever happened to our family. It destroyed the false relationships we had been maintaining and forced us to build something real in their place. Has your family ever made you question your own success or worth? Sometimes the people closest to us can be the ones who struggle most with our growth and achievements. I'd love to hear your thoughts about setting boundaries with family members while maintaining love and connection. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that you never have to apologize for working hard, achieving your goals, or refusing to accept treatment that doesn't match your value. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button to let me know. Subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family challenges, and share this with anyone who might need to hear that their success is something to celebrate, not hide. Remember that healthy relationships are built on mutual respect, not endless sacrifice. Sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to participate in someone else's manipulation while keeping the door open for genuine change. I wish you the strength to know your worth and the wisdom to protect it, while still keeping your heart open to authentic connection.